Good afternoon and welcome to the 16th Regulators and Policymakers Retreat being organized by API here at Goa. With me is Mr. Gopal Saxena, who is Director of the BSES Rajdhani and the BSES Yamuna power utilities that supply power to much of Delhi. Welcome to the retreat, Mr. Saxena.
Hi Raghav, pleasure to be here with you and in the retreat.
Thank you, sir. We'd like to know, sir, what has been your experience at the retreat so far and why do you like coming to the retreat?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent opportunity to share views for the development of the sector, to interchange ideas, communicate with the people who are here, and to listen to various opinions, which eventually will enrich and make this entire energy sector vibrant and strong. So it's a great opportunity.
So, Delhi's been in the eye of a storm in the last few years. The whole set of controversies we know, A, the cost of power, B, the regulatory assets, the role of the regulator, the role of the discoms. What is it that Delhi can actually do, sir, to bring down the cost of power at a time when fuel prices, even if they may be temporarily down, but on a general long-term trend, they've been rising. So the cost of power that you get, a large part of it is actually fuel cost, and if your fuel cost is rising, how can Delhiites or consumers anywhere look at saving cost of power or bringing down cost of power?
Well, in an ideal scenario, if I was getting all my revenues in full, which indeed I am getting in terms of the billing that I do, but if that was sufficient to meet all my costs and my depreciation and the nominal return on equity that I earn, in that ideal situation, the cost of power would ideally be about 80%, and 10% would be the O&M charges and my depreciation and financial costs, and 20% would be the mix of all my O&M costs, my financial costs, my depreciation, and my return on equity. Return on equity is maybe 2–2.5%. That's all. Out of that 100 rupees.
Very low.
Extremely low. Then the issues that come up is that the cost that the consumer pays is largely driven by two elements. The first is the cost of power. That, as I told you, is about 80%. The second is the distribution cost. And let's say that that's about 6%, 5%, 6%, 7%. Now, Delhi utilities, the distribution cost is by far the lowest in the country on a per unit served basis. Of course, there can be opinions that can be lowered, but if you lower 5% of 5%, you're essentially lowering 0.25%. So our efforts at being the lowest distribution cost continue, but we are already there. The second is on the cost of power. Now, historically, the cost of power is governed by the PPAs that have been signed several years back, and most of these PPAs were signed under the MOU route, where the costs for the generators are driven by the orders of the CERC or by the state electricity regulatory commissions. And it's more or less a take or pay. There is no exit option available with us. Now, out of the overall power that we consume, the 90%, 95% is actually power that I get from these central or state utilities at costs which are set by CERC or by the state electricity regulatory commissions. In the case of Delhi, it is the DERC. So my hands are tied over there, and there's not much I can do. The other thing is that there is a need to maintain 24/7 availability of power in India, which requires that there will always be a certain amount of surplus power that I will have to plan for. My efficacy lies in being able to do my planning in such a manner that that surplus power is the minimum. And in fact, BSES Rajdhani Power Limited has been constantly at the forefront of ensuring that the surplus power is the least amongst all Delhi utilities on a like-to-like basis. Now, one of the issues that has been challenging us is that these recent increases in coal prices have cast their burden on increase in variable costs. And we have been advocating that some of the less efficient plants which have very high heat rates, in which means that the productivity from these plants is very low, we should be able to get out of those PPAs, and the fuel from these plants should be allocated to more efficient plants that have come up recently and which will provide a high level of productivity. So some of the plants, for instance, of NTPC, Anta, Oraya, some of the units of NTPC relating to Badarpur, that is BTPS 1, 2 and 3, the 95 megawatt units, they have a very high heat rate. Now, if these are shut down, first the incidence of fixed cost will not be there on us. The second is that whatever is the fuel allocation to these plants can be diverted to more, if I may say so, productive plants which have come up recently. For instance, Badarpur fuel can be diverted to Aravali. And there the heat rate is far better, the productivity is better, and there are great opportunities for having higher production at lower cost. Similarly, the plants in Delhi, for instance, Rajghat, the gas stations. If Rajghat is shut down, for instance, the fuel can be again diverted to Aravali, which is a plant which is a joint venture between NTPC and Delhi. If the gas stations are shut down, which have very high heat rates, and the gas is diverted to Bhawana, we believe that it will lead to higher generation and more productive utilization of scarce resource like gas. And I think we've given proposals as to how, for Delhi alone, just this small amount of tweaking can result in about 800 crore saving per annum, and another additional production of 85 crore units, which translates into something like 3,500–4,000 crores. So it's a win-win situation. But there are...
What about the fixed charges of the Badarpur plants and all that?
They will devolve. They will disappear, because if these plants are shut down, the fixed cost will not be there. That's why I said that the savings will be of the order of about 800 crores through improved production from the new plants, the doing away of the fixed charges, and the greater availability of power. And in a similar vein, one can look across the cross spectrum of PPAs that have been signed and see what's the most effective way to manage those PPAs. Now, historically, let me also, with due deference to whatever has been done, I don't think historically whatever has been done in the past is not all wrong. There was a time when the cost of power available through the exchange or on the bilateral market was continuously rising. And up till 2008, 2009, when it peaked, the power rates had gone up very high. So it made sense to be on the surplus side in those days, because you could sell that power and earn some arbitrage on that. It is only after the frequency bands were tightened by CERC successively that the rates of power have crashed. And today, cheap power is available at 3 rupees or so on the exchange, largely because most of the stranded assets that are there in the generation sector, and these are basically the private sector participants, they are having to pump power in at vastly reduced rates if just to keep their plants operational. But that's a short-term phenomenon. Eventually, the prices will level out, and therefore.
So, do you believe that CRC should loosen the band?
I don't think there is any need to loosen the band. What I think is that there is a need to look at how to manage this whole sector in a far more professional manner, which means that there should be some exit options on some of the PPAs, and a way that your power basket is filled up with some long-term contracts, with some medium-term contracts, and with some short-term purchases, for which you need freedom. Freedom from the regulator, you need freedom from the so-called PPAs. So it's something that the country needs, because it's not only true for India as a whole. It's not only true for Delhi, it's true for India as a whole. And I guess that in the evolving strategy of carriage and content, I think agglomeration of power will in any case be a necessity. Because unless that happens, the carriage and content model will suffer from various inadequacies and deficiencies.
So, do you believe that Delhi can perhaps arrest its growing power costs by renegotiating PPAs? Is there an option, and who can give that option of renegotiating a PPA? Because the generator would not want to,
No, I think this is something which requires a great amount of thinking at the level of the Ministry of Power, at the level of the central regulators and the state regulators. The forum of regulators will play an important part in this. Central regulators will play a very important part, and obviously the Ministry of Power, because what you're trying to do is evolve a strategy, and I think at some point of time it will require the blessings of the government in whatever form. It may be the cabinet committee, it may be the empowered committee, or it may just be the parliament by itself. I think but I think it should be seriously attempted.
So, coming to the issue of power equipment, involved in the last mile connectivity, do you foresee Delhi adopting or having the budget to adopt smart grid and newer technologies, perhaps having convergence when you can have internet services delivered through the cables, through the transmission electricity cables? Is that possible?
Everything is in the realm of possibility. That's the first part. The second part is that Delhi is probably at the front end of technology and processes across whole of India. So our networks are, as it is, fairly smart. I mean, I don't think there is any other utility where the meter cache cycle is entirely smart and analytics driven, as is done in BSES. Our grids are SCADA connected. The question of adapting, moving on to technological and process excellence and innovation is also, I would say, partly driven by how the regulators tend to look upon it. And we on our own try to keep moving ahead through pilots that will demonstrate the efficacy of technology. For instance, we have recently done some smart substation management pilots which have proved entirely successful, and these will enable us to control our outages better, to be able to respond to outages, etc. Similarly, we are looking at many aspects related to power line communications and RF technology with a view to gaining a technological edge and putting us at the forefront of technology when it comes to consumer analytics, consumer meter acquisition data, and provision of services. The last point of your question was with respect to the Internet of Things and the availability of Internet over power line communications. which is very much in the realm of reality. There are certain technological challenges in using the power line communication to be able to provide the internet through a wireless configuration at the residence. It is physically, let me say, even today possible. But we have to resolve the problems of interference. And if we can do that successfully through some of the pilots that we hope to be able to take up shortly, then it's a great thing, because then you can deliver content, including digital signals for TV, over the power line.
Is it possible then for consumers in the near future to perhaps look at an app that will allow them to control the power supply at home when they're not there, or to turn things on and off and better manage their power management at home?
That is anyways possible even today. We provide or consumers who want to utilize these services, we have given them the option of being able to subscribe to instant, if I may say so, monitoring of their home network or business network, and put in switches which can enable them to switch on, switch off, and do their own demand management very effectively. BSES is today equipped to be able to do that even now, and we are doing it for some of our consumers.
On that note, sir, thank you so much for your participation and support to the retreat.
Thank you, Raghav.
We look forward to more retreats.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.